college football has major problems and they need to be fixed right now.
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Benson McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This is your top source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth. Coaching carousel, realignment, transfer portal, and more. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today. You'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. Jeff Hafley is no longer the head coach at Boston College. He went to be the defensive coordinator for the Green Bay Packers. Yeah, that's a problem for college football. Coaches are leaving the sport in droves. Why? Because the lack of a centralized governing structure in this, the greatest sport on planet Earth. It's honestly amazing the sport has survived as long as it has with how poorly it is run. You have set up a system in which the calendar makes completely no sense, in which it is utterly broken, in which rules, as we're seeing at Tennessee, can be selectively enforced, in which coaches have very little to say over some players and whether or not they choose their school because the players have got all the power. Players have been completely empowered, and that dynamic has shifted so far in one direction. Coaches are throwing up their hands and saying, nope, I'm done. Nick Saban, nope, he retired. He's done. He doesn't want to do it anymore. Jim Harbaugh, yeah, I won a national championship. I don't want anything to do with college football anymore. And Jeff Hafley, who's made a bowl appearance in 3 of his 4 seasons at the helm for Boston College, that's a conference that is open to having risers. That's a conference in which Boston College could be a bigger brand than it has been, in which he has built a solid foundation that he's looking to build upon. Instead, he doesn't go take a head coaching position. No, he goes to be a defensive coordinator because the NFL is suddenly looking a lot more appealing than college football. Why? Because you're asking coaches to have an impossible schedule. The end of the regular season is the last week in November around Thanksgiving. Conference championship weekend is the following week. And then after that, the transfer portal opens. Meanwhile, the season is still ongoing because bowls are a thing. Coaches then have to try and manage that. Oh, by the way, there's 2 signing windows, with one being the early one. The only one that matters now where, all the good players pretty much that we care about in a recruiting class are committing in early December. You're managing bowl game preparation, transfer portal recruiting, and high school recruiting, all jammed into a 1-month span. And for what? For what? It makes no sense. Spencer, what about the academic calendar? Spencer, it's got to coincide with school. Does it? Does it? Really? Because last time I checked, Michigan players and now Boston College transfers and Washington transfers as well have been able to go into the portal as the semester has already started everywhere. School's already back in session, and yet kids are going to be able to move and just transfer some credits and get priority access and make it work. That's just not a good excuse. It's not a good excuse. And there are no good excuses as to why this sport is so poorly constructed. And again, it amazes me that it is as popular as it is. It can be even better. I think the interest and the television viewership is only going to have an upward trajectory. But just because something is growing doesn't mean it is healthy. Because college football cannot be examined right now from an outside perspective. And the result of that examination be, yeah, this is in a really good place. Yeah, everything's good. Coaches would rather be in the NFL. Why? Because recruiting is a nightmare. And there are a lot of coaches that love to recruit. But even they would tell you, either on or off the record, it's too crazy. It's too hectic. There's so much on their plate all the time. And the schedule is so poorly aligned that you are having coaches reach their breaking point. And this is in the early stages of the portal, which is potentially going to be regulated even less than it is now. This is in the early stages of legalizing NIL. All of these changes came about. There was no real plan. There was no real structure in place Because there's no centralized governing body. There should be the NCAA, but all they're good for is enforcing NIL violations that nobody cares about, oftentimes, like at Arizona State, punishing people that weren't even responsible for the actions that were taken at a particular university, and keeping players from being eligible to play because that's what the NCAA is good for now. They run March Madness. I love March Madness. But for college football, the NCAA is completely and utterly useless, and it is a problem. This is a problem. You have college jobs that are less desirable than coordinator positions elsewhere. Think about this from a managerial standpoint. If you were running a major corporation, would you think that your corporation has a good, positive culture, is moving in the right direction, is trending in a way that makes investors want to buy into what you are doing, if you have second-tier managers that are poised to make the jump to be executive members of the corporation or company or whatever you are doing, and they're saying, I would rather take a less important role at a different company than stay at this company. If you're second in line at Apple, which is a pretty successful company, they've done all right for themselves. If you were second in line at Apple, and you knew the CEO at some point would step aside and you're the next guy to be there, but you just want out so badly, you go and take the number 4 position at a different corporation that is almost a competitor to what you were trying to do there at Apple, would that be a good indicator of the culture and the underlying fundamentals of what's going on within the organization? No, of course not. Of course not, because it isn't. There is no logic to the way that things are structured. Realignment doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense. Didn't need to happen, but it has happened. And in some ways, you can argue it's good for the sport. More big matchups. That could have been fixed if you had a centralized body for scheduling, but schools get to do their own scheduling. And each conference gets to do things their own way. You have conferences out there playing different numbers of league games and pretending that everyone has the same chance to get into the playoff. It's ridiculous. In the ACC and SEC, you play 8 conference games. In every other league, you play 9. Well, why is that? Because no one tells the SEC or ACC that you have to do it this way or that way. Now, some of those teams have got SEC, ACC matchups like Florida and Florida State that make it, okay, yeah, that's all right. Others, not so much. The lack of a governing institution, and by the way, I don't think one's going to form. I think this is just the world that college sports and college football has created for itself. Because where is this organization going to come from? The conferences have got the power, have got the money, have got the influence. Who's going to force them to give that up? Congress? Good luck. Good luck. If you're relying on Congress to come in and save your sport, boy, I tell you. I've got a bridge in Brooklyn that I would like to sell you that could be a lucrative financial opportunity for you and your family. These are not sustainable ways to operate a sport. You cannot ask coaches to do what is basically impossible and just try to juggle so many different things and expect a lot of them to stick around. The best coach in the history of the sport, he's gone. Look at college basketball. Legendary coaches have thrown up their hands and said, no, I'm done not doing this anymore. That's not good for the sport. You don't want to be the less desirable of the 2 options for people to consume football. You don't want to be that. That is not desirable, and that's the way college football is moving. Changes are needed. The calendar needs to be fixed. There needs to be a centralized governing body. I just don't know where it comes from. The Big 12's got a centralized governing body for their schedule, and they made a mistake. Going to FanDuel is never a mistake, though, because if you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. By the way, did you know there are already college football odds you can bet on out there? Yeah, it's true. You got national championship odds. You got individual game odds. You've got Colorado's win total at 4.5. Do you like free money? That's how, some people might view this particular entity. Do you like free money? Because Colorado over 4.5. I'm just telling you. I don't know if that line's going to stay at 4.5. And I love Colorado over 4.5. I'm going to hammer that from now until the season starts. You can bet who will win Super Bowl 58 in the meantime. FanDuel also has bets for who will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and more. New customers, join today. You get 200 bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. The Big 12 has messed up with its scheduling in 2024. Who better to talk about that with than Drake Toll, the host of Locked On Big 12 on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts Monday through Friday, just like this very show. Drake, I am puzzled because I was looking for rivalry week on the Big 12 schedule this year because I look for that in every conference. I also look for who's got a favorable schedule here and there. We might touch on Colorado later. I think they're a really good bet at over 4.5 wins. But what's the Big 12 thinking?
It's a scared move. It's a scared move. You're going to see people justify this by saying that the Big 12 has moved its marquee matchups around and tried to sprinkle them throughout the season. You'll get a BYU playing Utah, which I think is the biggest game in the Big 12 this season, biggest rivalry at least, on November 9th. And the reason the Big 12 is doing this is to try to keep things away from rivalry weekend, from Auburn, Alabama, from the game. But instead, we get TCU and Cincinnati. And to me, this delegitimizes what the Big 12 gives you as a product. It is settling to say, okay, we know that the SEC is so much bigger, that's so much better. The Big 10 is so much bigger, so much better. If the reasoning is to stay away from the big games, well, then you're just saying, we're not good enough. You're laying down, you're falling on your own sword and saying we can't compete, so we're not going to attempt to. I believe that the right number of eyes on rivalry weekend could be on BYU and Utah if that game is even on a Friday where a lot of these marquee matchups are played. I don't think that having the lone rivalry, Spencer, here's what ticks me off the most. The only rivalry that weekend is Arizona State, which in the Big 12,
classic Big 12 rivalry if I've ever heard one, Drake.
They have one 6 win between them in history. I would rather Iowa State and Kansas State. They probably hate each other on a larger scale than Arizona State. And that's the rivalry that we put out there. That might be the joke of the cherry on top of the joke of the sundae of what the Big 12 decided to do in scheduling. Look, it's easy. And you could have had more protected rivalries or pods or something strategic, but it just feels like the Big 12 keeps whiffing when it comes to the football schedule.
Which is strange because they do basketball so well. Every time I tune into basketball, it's the deepest basketball conference in the country. It seems like they're churning out top 25 matchups every week. Now, they have a very strong conference, I think stronger comparatively than what they've got in the football sphere, and that helps. But it is difficult, right? You lose Red River, you lose Bedlam. Those are big, nationally relevant rivalries, and it's tough to go in that direction. But I do think they need to consider, what is our marquee game? Every conference has one, okay? In the Big Ten, no matter which teams come in and out, Ohio State, Michigan, that's your flagship game. Everybody's going to watch that. The SEC has now got Red River. That's what it was in the Big 12. I don't think the Pac-12 really had one. I think they had a couple, Oregon, Washington, Oregon, USC, maybe little USC, UCLA in there, but none of those were on the same level. And guess what? The Pac-12 is not here anymore. The ACC, Florida State, Clemson, must-watch television. Everybody knows it. Big brands, big game. I think the Big 12 is still working to define itself in that sense. You can only do that when you have big brands and really good, successful programs, which leads me into the next point I wanted to hit with you here, which is, go ahead.
I want to touch, Spencer, on your Clemson Florida State take, which I really like that you mentioned that. 15 years ago, nobody cared about that. When Clemson and Florida State were playing, this wasn't a thing. Nobody cared. What created that was consistent winning on the part of Clemson, even more so than Florida State, considering their tumultuous last decade. So when one of those two teams was really good and the other was a powerful brand, that created must-see TV. To me, it shows good rivalries can be crafted over the course of time, over the course of 10 years of legitimate success from one party. Clemson wasn't a power in college football. If Kansas State develops into a Clemson type by 2035, that's a big if. But in that scenario, if they've got somebody built into their schedule they play every year, then we can begin to craft those rivalries in the Big 12. Instead, Brett Yormark balks on that. I think it's for the worse.
I think Utah is such a steady, consistent program, and they're going to be at or near the top of the conference every year, especially this season. They're my favorite to win the Big 12 right now, and I wanted to get into this with you because I believe we have differing opinions here. It is my contention the Big 12 is a one-bid league in 2024. I think that over time, that can change, but right now, I think if it comes down to this team's resume and that team's resume and an at-large berth here or there, I don't see the Big 12 team that's going to get the benefit of the doubt from the committee. And this is still going to happen, right? Everyone talks about the playoffs. It's going to be so much better. Teams will actually have access. We're going to have the same debates about 9-3 SEC teams, 11-1 G5 teams, or 11-2 Big 12 or all this sort of stuff. These debates are still going to go on. And I think brand power does, in fact, matter in those particular debates. I think the Big 12 is going to get their conference champion in no matter what. I don't have any reservations about that whatsoever. But after that, I don't see how they get a second team in. Do you?
Yeah, so the one thing that does benefit the Big 12 is if we do officially, at some point we have to move to the 5+7 format where it's 5 conference champions and then 7.
I anticipate that'll happen. I can't see that not happening.
I think it's got to. It's got to. Kirk Schultz be damned. It's got to. And when that day comes, it adds in one more at-large team. That's going to benefit, to me. It obviously benefits a French team. Can the Big 12 get that French team? The way that it happens, the way that you get 2 in, or even 3. Now, do I think 3 will happen next year? That's a lot. I'm asking a lot there. But the way that it happens is Utah goes 10-2 and misses the Big 12 championship. Utah goes 10-2, and then you have your TCU type, you have your Baylor type from 2021, TCU in 22.
I feel like the math gets tricky on Utah 10-2, not in the Big 12 title game.
We start talking tiebreakers. If you got one team that's a 1-loss team in Big 12 play, 2 teams that are 2-loss teams, and Utah is 10-2 with an undefeated non-conference. Now you can't keep 10-2 Utah out. Can you keep out another Big 12 team that went 10-3?
See, but here's the thing. I think you could. I think 10-2 Utah could absolutely miss the playoff without a conference championship game appearance. Now 11-2 Utah, that's different. 11-2 Utah that does what Oregon did this year. They go 11-1 in the regular season, lose the Big 12 championship game. That could be a path. I do not see 10-2 Utah because I don't think the Big 12 is going to get enough respect nationally to where a team that is not playing for its conference championship is going to get an at-large, because you're going to have 10-2 teams, like just on the surface, 10-2 Big 12 or 10-2 SEC. That's going to be SEC all day, every day, and it's probably going to be that way in the Big 10 as well. That's where my objection comes into. I think it is a pretty narrow and damn near impossible path for the Big 12 to have multiple teams in the playoff this year.
The only thing, the biggest saving grace is that the committee has valued the Big 12 over the ACC at times. If that trend continues as you saw this year. Now, look, I think Texas is a different animal. It's tough to consider Texas a Big 12 team. And someone's going to balk at that statement, but truly, that brand transcends the conference, and that helped them get in the college football playoff. I believe that's the case. These are people making these decisions, not the computer, so that brands can get in, so that money can be made. We have seen that this is a money-making business. Will it benefit the Big 12? Will the Big 12 benefit over the ACC? I can't guarantee it, but I do see a realm in which, again, your conference champion gets in as a lock in the new format. What if that's a team that came in at 9-3? We see 9-3 teams in the Big 12 championship. They win it. They go 10-3. The loser falls to 11-2, or even at 11-2.
That's where I think it gets That's where I think it gets dicey. That's where That's where your non-conference can come into play, right?
Yeah,
and then you're getting to, well, which team is sitting there at 11-2, losing to a 9-3 team in the Big 12 championship game? Who are your quality wins against? Because I feel like the SEC is going to get the advantage there, and I think the Big 10 would have the advantage there. The ACC is closer to equal footing. I think the ACC has got stronger horses at the top. I think once you get to the middle, especially now that Jeff Hafley's gone from Boston College, I take the Big 12 there. I think there are a lot of really, really good teams in the middle. I just don't know if there are going to be enough dominant teams that could win 10-11 regular season games. I think you could go through this Big 12 schedule and have a battle of 9-3 teams.
And the thing is, we say that all the time. We say that so often, and then you have your TCUs, you have your Baylors, you have your Oklahoma State every 3 years where you go, and this on paper is probably a 7-5 squad, but the way the schedule falls, somebody like a Texas Tech this year might go 11-1. You look up and you say, do they deserve to be 11-1? I don't know, but they are. And in a situation like that, a la TCU getting in, it's tough to keep that team out. same as how Cincinnati got in from the AAC. It's just tough to keep that team out sometimes.
It can be, for sure. You mentioned Texas Tech real quick. They got a scheduling break in the offseason because Oregon wants to keep the game against Oregon State going. So Texas Tech plays at Washington State instead of at Oregon. I'm not saying Pullman's an easy place to play. It definitely is not, but that's a more winnable game than going to Autzen Stadium in Eugene, without a doubt. Real quick, Drake, before I let you go. Colorado, their win total is posted at 4.5. I love what they have done in the offseason in the trenches on both sides of the ball. They're adding Power 5 starters, guys that are going to be massive upgrades from a season ago. You've got Shedeur Sanders, you've got Travis Hunter, you've got other skill position guys. Over 4.5 feels like it's not going to last until the season begins.
No, I don't think that Colorado finishes under 5 wins this year. Now, I said the same thing this last year. After Colorado rattled off a couple of wins, I had them at minus 150 to go over 4.5 games, put the whole mortgage on it. I'm homeless now. So as much as I want to support the Colorado trend, I do think Deion Sanders and company will be better. Who's the best? What is the best roster, Spencer, in the Big 12? It's Colorado. They have the most 4 and 5 stars. They have the best roster, talent-wise, per 24/7 in the Big 12, the best transfer class now the last 2 years. At some point, to me, I think that has to click. One of the best quarterbacks in this conference, top 3 for sure, if not number 1. There are too many weapons with Colorado for them to finish without going to a bowl game at the very least in this league. I've got them at 6 wins. A Cincinnati game at home, that's a win. Oklahoma State at home, Baylor at home, both of those could be wins. I think Colorado at least goes to a bowl. 4.5 is a joke.
I completely agree. I would hammer over 4.5 wins for Colorado, especially
at FanDuel, right?
Exactly, at FanDuel. Absolutely 100% at FanDuel. And by the way, go look at their schedule. Go pull up Colorado's schedule for 2024. Tell me you don't see at least 5 wins. I think they're in the 6 to 8 range at a minimum come 2024. Drake Toll, Locked On Big 12, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts all year round. His inaugural appearance here on Locked On College Football shall not be his last. Drake, thanks so much for stopping by. The people enjoy it.
Spencer, always a pleasure.
Coming up next, Texas needs to relax, like Aaron Rodgers style. RELAX. They need to relax. All right, Texas, it's time to have a talk. Let's have a heart-to-heart, Texas, SEC member, Texas. Do we all remember that? Do we all remember that Texas is in the SEC? Watch this. I'm going to get myself potentially banned from any Texas event ever. I don't actually feel that way. You shouldn't have felt anything. For those listening on podcast, I put the old horns down. The utter ridiculous insanity that has transpired over the last several weeks and months with regards to this gesture is utterly insane, and this needs to stop. And Texas fans have to understand, the Big 12 acted, and I have no idea why they felt like they owed anything to Texas, which almost destroyed their league several years ago when they in Oklahoma announced they were going to the SEC. The Big 12 has acted and told people and fans at a BYU basketball game, take off the horns down shirts. Hey, you can't do this. No horns down. I got news for you, Texas. You're going to the SEC. Their mantra in the SEC, you may or may not have heard of it before, goes a little something like this. It just means more. Once upon a time, in a treasured rivalry in the Southeastern Conference, a man went so far as to poison a tree because of football. If you are going into this conference, whether you're the administrators, coaches, players, fans, alumni, boosters, Matthew McConaughey, I don't care who you are. If you can't handle someone taking 2 fingers and in a non-offensive tone and manner and intention flip them the other way, you're not going to fare very well. You're going to find fans down there in the Southeastern Conference who are going to do and say things that are a heck of a lot meaner than take the horns and put it down. You know what the proper response is when another team gives you the old horns down? It is not to go cry and tattle. That is not how you deal with a bully. Now, this may be ironic because I am not a parent, nor am I close to being one in my life. I'm going to take a stab at it here. When a bully comes over and is tormenting you, is the best thing to do go tattle to the teacher? Is that going to stop him from harassing you and bothering you? Or is that going to make it worse? Because when you go to the conference and say, hey, they're doing the horns down again. Well, does that mean anything? Does it mean anything offensive? No, it's just, I just don't like it. What are you going to incentivize them to do? You're going to incentivize them to do it more. And I'm not so certain that over in the SEC, where it just means more and vitriol knows no bounds, there's a hilarious photo from many years ago in which an Alabama player scores a touchdown, I believe, or a Tennessee player, I think, scores a touchdown in Tuscaloosa, runs through the end zone, and an Alabama fan is right there giving him the double bird. That is wildly more directly offensive than doing horns down. Horns down is just a way to get in your head. And Texas fans, alumni, administrators, anybody who's got a problem with this, coaches and players, you're allowing this to get in your heads. And this is not going to be conducive to succeeding. Because if that can bother you, I got news for you. It's going to be a struggle next year. I think Texas is a really good football team. I love what they've done in the transfer portal. Going out and getting Isaiah Bond from Alabama, Silas Bolden from Oregon State, Quinn Ewers coming back at quarterback, Steve Sarkisian's still there. I love what Texas brings on the field. But here's the other part of it with Texas. As the Longhorns fan base and athletic department, there are already reasons for other fans, whether they're in your conference or not, to not like you. You may be okay with that. Texas is consistently among and has often been the most cash-rich athletic department in all of college athletics. For years, announcers and players and fans and media pundits have bloviated about Texas being back. Only when they stopped declaring themselves back did they actually start to compete at a national championship level, when they just went down and got to work. Sidebar, take notes, Texas A&M. It's not just about recruiting, having money, flash substance and everything. Get down to the nuts and bolts of what it takes to win football games. I think Mike Elko can do that and understands what that takes. Let's recenter this conversation back to the Longhorns here. If you are legitimately bothered by players or coaches or fans or whatever doing a horns down, college sports might not be for you, because there's a line. There's a line that fans or students or anybody should not and cannot cross. In fact, there are certain gestures that are outlawed, and rightfully so. There are words you can't say. On the list of banned, unacceptable line crossing words and phrases, horns down is not on the list. It's not there. It's not going to be there. Don't expect the SEC to come bail you out. Texas prides itself on being a very proud, passionate fan base. And then someone takes your hand gesture, which is well known across the entire country, and flips it upside down, and everyone is supposed to take that as some great offense. They're trying to get in your heads. The bully is coming over and pushing you around, and rather than just pushing back or letting the bully know that you're not actually bothering him, you have decided to let him know, this is bugging me like no other, and it's not doing you any favors. This is also utterly ridiculous that horns down has been taken as some great offense, as some massive, colossal, personal disrespect. No, it's just called college sports. It's just called being a fan. It's just called the regular course of business. If you can't handle a little smack talk, if you can't handle someone taking a hand gesture and flipping it upside down and that being it, then I got two solutions for you. Number one, win the game. Can't really do horns down when, the horns are going to go up from all the fans. Steph Curry had a good line about this a while back. Chris Paul, he was going up against him in an NBA playoff series. And Chris Paul hit a three right in Steph Curry's face. And Steph Curry's iconic celebration is the shimmy. He gives it a little shimmy sometimes. And Chris Paul hit a three in his face. Tough shot, too. And he shimmied right in his face. Did Steph Curry go whining to Adam Silver and say, hey, can you make him not do that? I found that to be so disrespectful. Boy, that was so mean. Like, dude, he's not mentioning anything personal. There are no shots of your family being taken here. He's just trying to get an emotional edge. And Curry's comments went something like this. If you're going to shimmy, you better be ready to be shimmied on. That's what makes sports fun. Is you can go out there and be competitive and talk a little smack. And I'm okay with it. And I'm okay with pushing the envelope sometimes. There are lines that you do not cross. Horns down is not crossing a line. This is complete and utter insanity. And the fact that this has caught on to where you've got a BYU basketball coach being asked about what students wore on their T-shirts. Was there a swear word? No. Was there something insulting in a player or a girlfriend or a family member? No, not that either. Oh, well, who are they insulting? Well, no one really. It's just horns down. If you come up with your own hand gesture, you have to be prepared for other people to turn it around on you. This doesn't change how I feel about Texas as a football team going into 2024. They can be very, very good. I think they are a playoff team next year. The fan base, however, apparently, or someone, or administrators, someone needs to hear the message because this seems to be popping up routinely over the last couple of weeks, and it needs to stop. It needs to stop. We are not in Little League, okay? This is not, taunting is not an automatic ejection and your parents take you home or you can't talk smack or anything. No, that's what sports are. It's competitive. You got a bunch of alpha males out there getting the competitive juices out. And if you're going to horns up when you hit a shot or fans are going to do it, guess what? People are going to horns down when it goes their way. And that's all right. And that sort of gamesmanship, that sort of mental mind games, not only am I okay with it, I'm 100% here for it. And guess what? If you go into a hostile environment, whether it's Texas football, basketball, softball, baseball, I don't care, and someone's giving you horns down, if you win the game, you get to throw it right back in their face. That's the way this works. But enough with the horns down is some horrible, no good, very bad, offensive remark. It just isn't. Relax a little bit. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.